Story 1. Am I the a-hole for pulling out of my sister's wedding due to her in-laws? For background, Stella and I are identical twins, 29 female, and we will both be 30 when her wedding comes around this fall. I had her as my maid of honor 8 years ago, and she promised me that I could be hers when her wedding came around. I have 2 kids, both female, 6 and 3. They're the flower girls. My marriage fell apart just over 2 years ago, due to a stillbirth and my husband's infidelity. My parents and sister were the only reason I didn't drown from the stress, loneliness, and total abandonment of my spouse. I was a total mess. I went to therapy, got diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, quit drinking, and I owe a lot of it to my amazing sister. She's the reason why I kept chasing down my ex for child support when he stopped suddenly paying. He suddenly switched from world's best dad to deadbeat dummy so quickly that my ex-mother-in-law is disgusted with him. Stella and John, 35 male, engaged last year. His parents are paying about 60% of the wedding. Our parents are paying 30%. Stella and John are paying for the rest themselves. The biggest caveat is that they must be married in John's family church. Full mass with communion. The family is on board because this is going to be a very big wedding. Tonight, Stella had invited me to dinner as they had finally reserved a date for the church reception, assuming it was to formally ask me to be her maid of honor. I was excited since I haven't been to a wedding party aside from my own wedding. John was with her. Weird, because Stella didn't mention him coming at all in our texts about dinner. We hugged like usual, but John didn't. Weirder. After we got our drinks, they got into it. In a nutshell, John expressed the following. Despite my best efforts to keep it secret, my parents found out that you're divorced when they asked why your husband wasn't coming. They're no longer comfortable with you as maid of honor, because it won't look good to the church if my family hears about the divorce. You can be a bridesmaid, but can't mention the divorce or your conditions at all during the wedding events. I was stunned, and I felt tears in my eyes. Stella started crying too, and she tried to spin it in a good way. This is way less stressful for you, so it's a good thing. Mother-in-law had already approved my BFF as my maid of honor, so please don't make this any harder. I knew that I couldn't possibly stay there through an entire meal. I had to process this new info alone. I didn't speak. I just paid for my wickedly expensive cocktail and left to order an Uber home. A few hours ago, I texted Stella that I would not be at her wedding party at all. This was my decision. I wouldn't pull my daughters out, but I would only attend as a guest. She wouldn't take this as an answer, so I had to temp block her due to excessive texts and calls. I sent my parents a summary of what happened and promised to call them when I was in better shape tomorrow. Stella thinks that this is a total overreaction. I don't even want to know what John thinks at this point. Please help me. Am I the a-hole? No, I don't think you're the a-hole. I think maybe it would have been better to think it over and get over the initial stuff and probably process it to try and make a decision. But it is entirely possible that being a part of the wedding ceremony would be the decision you still arrive at. I don't know if it's completely an overreaction, but to feel like you have such support from your family only to feel like it's gotten cut out from under you just because you have these other people that just completely reject you because of everything you're going through. Yeah, I can understand. I was surprised that she'd say that she would attend at all, just as a guest. What do you think? Story 2. Karen crashed into my Jeep and expects me to pay her cash for her damages because her children will starve if she pays to fix her car. So, some backstory. I own a Jeep. # Jeep Life, fully built, lift kit, ADD bumpers, the whole shebang. So one day I'm coming home from work. It's a summer day, the roof is off, and I'm having some open-top fun. Stop at a red light, and suddenly, scream, bang! I drive forward slightly and go back to assess the damage, and lo and behold, it's a Mercedes C-Class. New one as well. Completely destroyed from the front, and my beautiful Jeep had no damage apart from a few scratches. I went to check on the passenger of the Merc, got them out. Luckily, she was unharmed. These Mercs are definitely safe. Under a minute after she's out of the car, she starts screaming about how I wrecked her car. I told her calmly that she was the one who rammed into me. I think she understood how hitting her would be impossible. I offer her to share our insurance details because I know that Mercedes damage doesn't come cheap. But she said she didn't have insurance. She insisted that I pay her $10,000 cash. How did she get this number? I don't know. I said that was just plain wrong as, 1, she hit me, 2, it's her fault for not having insurance. She then went on a ramble about how her kids needed the money and they had no money at the time, and now her kids will have to starve because she'll have to pay to fix her car, and how it will be all my fault when they're on the street tomorrow. Yeah, on the street with a Mercedes, my butt. That's why you should have insurance. But no, she said she would call the cops if I didn't pay her. I refused, as this is just dumb, so then she called the cops. Yeah. Cops came, assessed the damage, and asked us what happened. And she said, and I quote, "She backed into me at full speed on a red light." Then they asked me what happened, and I told them. And it became a he said, she said situation. Luckily, a shopkeeper was there and saw the whole thing, and even captured it on surveillance camera. Needless to say, I came out on top. Cops got her for reckless driving, or driving without insurance, so then started yelling at the cops about how they would just let a criminal get away with it. They explained that I did nothing wrong and that they now have video evidence. The partner of the cop came to me and told me if I could drive, I can leave, so I got in my Jeep and left. Never want to have a Karen experience again. Not worth it. P.S. If you have a lifted Jeep with heavy-duty bumpers, a Mercedes can't do much damage. Again, in this day and age, have dash cams. Have dash cams. One on the front, one in the rear, whatever you need for anything like this. It's been like this all over the world. Thankfully, this person had evidence from someone else. So it did not become a he said, she said, or she said, whoever said situation. Thankfully, dash cams. Have dash cams. Story 3. Wait, you're our guide? But you're a girl. Okay, a bit to start with. I'm a freelance hiking and snowmobile guide on the island of Svalbard, Norwegian Arctic, and have to deal with all sorts of people on a day-to-day basis. I'm not super sure if this guy still qualifies as an entitled dad, since his son must have been at least 40, but here we go. A few months ago, I was guiding a trip by myself. We only sent one guide out when the group was small, so I went to the hotels to pick up my guests. An Italian couple and this Saudi Arabian father-son combo. I walk into the hotel, introduced myself, and got everybody to sit in the car, when the entitled dad opened the passenger seat door, sat down, and looked at me, confused. "Oh, sorry, is this your seat?" Me. "No, you can sit there if you want. It's easier to drive from the other side anyway." I always try to crack a joke or two to break the ice. Lots of people are nervous when having to drive a snowmobile for the first time. He looked at me slightly confused, but I assumed it's only a language thing. Brought them back to HQ and gave them a full safety briefing and overview on a map on where we'd be going. After that, I got them dressed and told them to wait outside, because our suits are made to keep you warm at negative 30 degrees Celsius, so inside a building you quickly start to melt. Once I was dressed, I went to meet them outside. The entitled dad. "Oh, you're coming with us on the tour?" Me. "Well, I hope so, since I'm your guide." I had told them in the briefing the usual, Hey, my name is Kat and I'll be your guide for today. ED. Is that a gun? Me. Yes, sir, but don't worry, she's not yet loaded. The dad and son look at each other confused, and we all start walking toward the snowmobiles so I could give them a small briefing on how to drive them. The Italians had told me they'd been driving before, so I decided to place them in the end of the group and dad and son in the front. Everybody got to drive their own vehicle, because out of experience, it's always better for the more experienced guests to be in the back, since they might have to speed up here and there to fill a gap. The dad. But where is the guide? Me. Here. I'm just in front of you. A proud 1.77 meters. Hard to miss. Dad. But you're female. Guides can't be female. Me. About 50% of our guides are girls here on Svalbard. It's not that uncommon. Don't worry, we girls are just as good as our male colleagues. Son, I think my father wants to know who'll operate the gun. Well, me. Well, let's not hope we don't even have to take it out of the boot, but if we have, I am trained and licensed to shoot. The son. No. Me. No? Son, you're a woman. Women can't shoot guns. The dad. It's not safe. Me. Excuse me? Guys, if you don't want me as a guide, that's fine with me. Go back into HQ, take the suit off, and tell our receptionist to call you a taxi. If you don't feel safe, that's up to you. But I am the guide for this trip today, and if you want to head out, you'll have to deal with me. Dad. But if we don't go, we want our money back. Me. You can try, but I bet you that you won't get a penny because it's your decision to not come along. Son. I'll go, if you get a male guide for us. Me. I won't get anybody else to join. You signed the agreement that I'm in charge of this tour, and you'll listen to what I tell you to do and not to do. Entitled Dad. I didn't sign anything. Me. Yes, about 15 minutes ago before you got dressed. I saw you sign it. The dad then walks off back into HQ. Son and the Italian stay. Son called his dad and found out the dad would not come with a woman. Son and the Italians drove with me. We saw reindeer, sea ice, a polar bear in the distance. No need for the rifle. And in general, had a great time. After the tour, Son came to me to apologize for his behavior and called me a good girl guide. My boss heard that and still mocks me with it to this day. It's a little bit of progress. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what. Maybe it's just where they live. But it's kind of ludicrous to think a girl couldn't be a guide on this thing if they've been trained and everything for this kind of thing. It's a very small thing for the son to admit he had a great time. Even though they said good girl guide, at least his mind was open just a little bit. And the dad wasn't. It seems kind of typical.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 4. A guy drove off with my couch while I was moving in because if it's on the street corner, it's public property. I just moved, Nevada, and it was just me and a couple of friends unloading. So we left some things on the street next to the moving truck while we did heavier items like desks, shelves, etc. as a team. I came out after bringing in some more boxes, had been gone roughly 15 minutes, to find a guy had loaded my couch into the bed of his truck. I ran up to him and explained I owned the couch. He said since it was on the street corner, it's public property, and he's within his rights to take it. He drove off before I could block his car. I did get his license plate and went to the police to make a report, but they asked me if it was in fact on the curb, and I said it was, but it was also pretty obviously next to a moving truck. It was wrapped up and surrounded by boxes, and I told him it was mine and I was moving, but the police didn't say anything that inspired hope. The couch had been in my family for 3 generations now, and while it probably isn't worth more than a few $100, it is sentimentally priceless. Is there anything else I can do or further ways to escalate this to get my couch back? Thanks all. I've lived in Nevada before. Probably not. I don't know where this person came from. I think they were probably in a place that was a little more trusting than a place like Nevada, especially if you're in a place like Las Vegas, depending on where you're at. If it's on the curb there and it was left by itself, you're going to have to expect that someone's going to try and take it. I mean, the very courage of this person to lift something like a couch. But there should have been at least one person hanging back, making sure this stuff was being looked after. So, I mean, not saying that this guy was in the right, but I think this guy knew he was lifting someone else's stuff and thought he could get away with it, and unfortunately, he was proven right. Story 5. Ended a tow company with one simple phone call. Several years back, I went to work for a towing company. It's about all I know how to do other than paint cars, which is drastically affecting my health. The pay was pretty decent, but we had to share trucks, and the boss felt that he knew where we needed to sit in order to get the best calls. This is important for later. Several months in, I realized that I wasn't making the type of money that I should be making. So, I took the opportunity while I was sitting in a parking lot one evening to start researching the laws pertaining to employees in similar positions. He was kind of a jerkwad, and the trucks had transponders on so that he could see if we had them idling with the air conditioner on a hot day or idling with the heat on during a cold day. He was always calling, complaining about something if the wheels were not turning. During my research, I discovered that if he was requiring us to sit in a certain parking lot, street, or any location of his choosing, then we were entitled to be paid an hourly wage, not just our commission. The technical term was engaged to wait. However, if he allowed us to freely roam about while we waited for calls, we weren't entitled to hourly wages, and we were therefore considered waiting to be engaged. I never mentioned this to him, but I did start taking note of my time. Another month or so goes by, and he decides to start coming down on me for tiny little hogwash, things that ordinarily wouldn't even matter, such as I forgot a pop can in the cup holder. He actually had a screaming fit about that. At this point, I was tired of working there and had already found another job, so I decided it was time to put my plan in motion. I called him up, told him that we needed to have a conversation about my final wages and that we could meet at his convenience. Upon entering the office, I laid out my argument, explained the state law, and told him I expected to be paid for the hours that I was on the clock, but not freely allowed to roam looking for work or able to do things of my choosing. He told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be paid for that time, as that was agreed to upon my employment. I did not bother to argue, as I had already had my next step planned, so I took my final check and left. The following Monday, I made a phone call to the State Labor Board, where I laid out my case to them. Needless to say, they were very interested in what was going on. In the end, they came to review his employment records and speak to the drivers still working. When he got the bill of what he had to pay us all, it was too much for him to afford, so he sold the trucks, his boat, and lot, and went out of business. I never got the money owed to me in full, only a fraction, but the satisfaction of knowing the law just a little bit better than he did and watching it all burn was pure bliss. Again, know your rights as an employee, and if you ever feel like you're in an awful situation by an employer, know that there is most likely some sort of recourse for you. If you just research, talk, and definitely, talk to other people, because an employer will always try to not let you have information. This just proves it. Always do your research.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.